Good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be a presentation for my English class 103, which is public speaking, and I'll be doing a presentation on the topic: why is it important for us to preserve the forest? Why is it important for us to preserve the forest? And as young people, I believe, or we all know something about the forest and the benefit that it provides for humanity. And it's not only where the forest is located, it goes beyond that. So I would like to find out from you guys if any of you had an idea about the benefit that we derive from preserving the forest, or the importance that we derive from preserving the forest. Does any of you have an idea about the importance or the benefit you get from a forest? Can any of you share your experience with us? Yeah.
Trees makes more oxygen.
So he says trees makes more oxygen, which is a very good point. Can any of you also give an answer?
So it says as resources change, like tourists.
Yeah, so basically, people, most of us who have lived in Africa, we know forest is like one of the resources that you get. A lot of tourist attraction, and they serve as like a place where most of the endangered species are being kept. And does any of you have another experience about the importance or the benefit of the forest? Um, so when we look at the rainfall pattern, the forest also plays a major role in when it comes to rainfall. When we look at flooding situations, which also falls under the rainfall pattern, forest plays a major role in it. Most of us who live long in Africa, you can see like we have some seasons where it rains all the time. But as we cut down trees and destroy the forest, the rainfall pattern changes, and sometimes the time that we expect rain to fall, it doesn't fall on that time. These are all effects that we get from destroying the natural reserve or the forest. So I want to do my presentation on this particular subject. Since living in the countryside with others from tribal traditional people, we look at forests with much respect, seeing them as sacred. That's what I'm saying. Most of the people get their livelihood, they get the things that help them to survive from the forest. So people who live in cities, who live in urban areas, they don't see the forest the way people who live within the forest will see it. Let's take for instance the people that live in the Amazon, the tribe that live in there. For them, they will have a different perspective about the forest compared to somebody who is living in the middle of New York or living in the middle of Manhattan. He only sees buildings and cars and trains. So with this person, he wouldn't pay much attention to the forest compared to somebody who is living in the middle of the forest, in the Amazon rainforest. Because those people knows the benefit of the forest. Even though there are most of the researchers who has came out with so many discoveries of medicinal plants and other things in the forest, we may still not pay more attention to it because we don't have a direct contact with it. But believing it or not, we have, when the effect comes, we have a direct effect, because whatever happens in those places, it triggers down to the people that live in the city. So people who live within the forest, we see the forest as something sacred. It's something unique to us. Aside the beautiful environment that we receive from the forest, we also see it in a different way. Because it is home, it is where we call home. Then when we continue, it is ancient and mysterious, like I said, whilst others also believe and support themselves with the law of science, acknowledging the existence of forests as biodiversity hotspot and a tool to fight climate change. Like I said, so for instance, we may not have a direct contact with the destruction of the forest, but when climate change begins to take effect, it doesn't really take effect in one particular geographic area. It takes effect in the entire continent, the entire area. So something may be going on in Africa. We may be in Europe or we may be in the States thinking that, oh, the illegal logging of trees the illegal mining and the other things that is going on in the small towns and in the small villages, destruction of our water bodies, destruction of our forests. We may think, oh, there is nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, climate change doesn't discriminate. It doesn't talk about, oh, you live in Europe, so you're not going to get the effect. You're definitely going to get the effect. Because as long as there are so many carbon releasing in the atmosphere, the, the environment or the place where that carbon is being released into the atmosphere may not be able to absorb them. It is going to be distributed to all over the world, and this is going to affect everything within the climate. So that's one thing. The forest helps to maintain the climate change, and it is a good biodiversity hotspot and a tool to fight climate change. Yet, for people who live in the cities and sometimes far away from urban life, it is easy to forget about the forest, how critical they are for balance of the earth and for our long-term survival. So the forest is also another thing which is helping us. Because there is a say that um, when the last plant dies, the last man dies. Because as we release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the trees are also giving us oxygen, which is very, very beneficial, very, very important to our survival and for our living. So, plant is basically one of the most important thing or the important natural resources that we have, which is directly supporting human's life and human survival. Since forests are complex, so forests are complex ecosystem on Earth, which contain trees, shrubs, grass, and more. The constituents of a forest, which are trees and plants, forms a major part of the forest. They create a healthy environment so so that various species of animals can breed and live there happily. So when we look at another importance of the forest, it serves as a place where other species of animals breed. As we live here, if you look around, we cannot see snakes, we cannot see lions, tigers, elephants, and other endangered species. But when you go to the forest, that's where they also call home. That's where they live and that's where they survive. There are so many animals, when you bring them from the forest, it will take an expert to be able to help them to survive. Why? Because they have been taken out from their natural habitat, their natural home. So that is what we are talking about. That is one importance of the forest. It helps those animals to be able to multiply, to breed, and continue the existence of those kind of breed that is fading away from the earth. Therefore, we see how forests are a habitat for a number of wild animals and birds. In addition to being of use to wildlife, forests benefit mankind greatly and hold immense significance. Forest covers a significant area of the earth. They are a great natural asset for a region and hold immense values. For instance, forests fulfill all our needs of timber, fuel, foods, and bamboos. So when we talk about the other benefit that human or man derive from the forest, we all know about timber. That is where we get wood and other things. And those timbers that we get are directly from the forest. Some of these trees has been there for over 100 years, for over 200 years, for over 50 years, and we take just a day to cut them down. Replacing that tree takes a long period of time, and looking at the destruction that man is causing, even though we are benefiting from the timber, in other words, we are also causing destruction to the forest. So that is one thing. We get a lot of things from the forest too. We get herbs, which is we get medicinal plants from the forest. Those are plants that you cannot find them anywhere, with the exception of going to the deep forest. So that is one other important that man is getting. We get our timbers and other things from the forest. You also get some mineral resources from the forest, and this is mostly important, or it benefits the people who live around that particular area. For instance, if I take Ghana, for instance, we have a forest which provides us like gold. We get gold from that forest too. We get if it is properly mined, and if we follow the right procedure to do it, that gives us a good benefit as well, because it brings income to the environment or the area where that forest is located. We get minerals like you get gold and diamond from the forest as well. If it is properly mined and well done, which doesn't bring destruction to the forest, it also helps the people around to survive, and it serves as a good income to the country where it is being located. It says forests are rightly called as the lungs of the earth. So when we say something is the lungs of it's just an idiomatic expression. It is the lungs of the earth. That's where the earth breathes. Because all the carbon monoxide, all the carbon oxide that we release into the atmosphere, the forest is the most important place which helps to filter the air, which helps to absorb all those harmful substances and then be able to release good air for us, give us oxygen and other things. So that's why we say forests are richly called the lungs of the earth. They, they are the most important part of ecosystem and are pivoted in maintaining the balance in the food cycle and the natural equilibrium on the planet. So when we talk about the food chain, the food cycle, yes, forest plays major roles in our food cycle. As we talk about there are so many plants in the forest which also provide seed, fruit, and other leaves which are basically food for human beings, food for some kind of animals that are directly consumed by man. So, for instance, we may not be able to eat the leaves of some of the other trees, but we have other animals that lives in the forest which depends on it as their main source of food, and we depend on those animals. That is why we say the forest also helps us. It helps in the food chain process because it goes around as the small animals feed on the plant, the big animals feed on them. We also feed on the animals too. So that is another benefit or importance of the forest. And then it says forest covers almost 31% of the surface of the earth, which is very, very, very important. But it says forest covers like 31% of the earth. If the entire landscape is 100%, forest alone takes 31%. And remember, every settlement that we are being created on this earth, it comes from forest because we cut down the forest and then we turn it into human settlement. So looking at all the benefits and all the importance that we are receiving as of now, the more we continue to cut down the trees and then turn it into settlement, we continue to cause harm to the kind of life that is being preserved over there. Some kind of plants that are very, very important to human life, we are cutting them down, and most of them are fading out of the system. There are some birds like 15 years or 20 years or 30 years ago, they were within our locality, they are within the forest. But because of this harm that we are causing to the forest, all these birds are fading away because now they don't have place to live, they don't have where to be able to nurse their young ones. And these ones, as they grow old and die, they fade out of the system. So these are some of the few and the most important reasons why we must do everything possible to preserve and keep the forest. For instance, we may want to be able to continue to produce the kind of medicines that we get from plants, but without being able to preserve the forest, we will not be able to get the raw materials that we need to be able to provide those kind of medicine. Since man has been man has been using the resources of forest for thousands of years. As much as the forest has provided man with the livelihood, man has not given back to the forest as much as he should have. And this overuse, imbalance, and greed of man has led to disturbances in the natural cycle of the earth. Forests are vital to life on earth. They purify our air, they purify the air we breathe, filter the water we drink, prevent erosion, and act as an important buffer elements against elements that changes the environment. Forest offers a home to much of the world's diverse plant and animals and provide essential natural resources from timber and food to medicinal plants. Forests also support the lives of local communities and help them to survive. But forests around the world are under threat. Despite the key role forests plays in the world's environment and economic health. We continue to lose forests along with the endangered animals that live in them. In 2020, the, the tropic lost more than 21 million hectares of trees covered. So I'm going to repeat that part again, which is very, very important. Only in 2021, the number of hectares that was lost from the tropical forest. It says in 2020, the tropical lost more than one that's more than 12 million hectares of trees covers. The, that is roughly 30 soccer field worth of trees every single minute. Every minute, that's the amount of forest that we are destroying. So looking at that, that's what I say. Is people who live in the cities may not see this effect because we don't see people logging trees around us. But if you go to other places like Congo, Ghana, in the mostly the West African countries or the other part of the world where forest is like we have a lot of forest, that is what is going on. Why? Because that's the most um, resources that the country is surviving on to be able to also provide for their needs. So this is a very big threat to the forest. So for now, if we were to do another research, I don't think we'll have like 30% of our natural resource, the forest reserve, because every minute there are like 12 million hectares of forest being destroyed, and um, um, and then it says again why we must protect the forest at all costs. Forests provide invaluable environmental, social, and economic benefit to us all. Many of the world's most endangered animals depend on forests for their survival. These forests also contribute directly to the livelihood of over 90% of 1 billion people that lives in extremely poverty. So we know that people who survive solely on the forest are people who are in extremely condition, poor people. Because people who live in the middle of the forest, like the tribe that live in the Amazon forest. When you go to Congo too, they have like a tribe that also live in the middle of the forest. In India, they have a tribe that live in the middle of the forest. These are tribes which are living in extremely poverty. They depend solely on the forest. Their food, the water they drink, the herbs, everything that they use comes from the forest. So these are most of the reasons why we must do everything possible to be able to preserve the forest. Since deforestation and degradation from illegal and unsustainable logging, fire and firewood harvesting can impair wildlife and jeopardize people's livelihood and intensify climate change. Like I said earlier, all these activities may destroy the homes of most of the wildlife and then the endangered species that we grow. Effect of climate changes. Most of us may not know the effect of climate changes. We only hear, oh, climate change, but we may not know the effect. So let's take a look at the effect of climate change. It says deforestation represents 15% of global greenhouse gases emissions, which contribute to climate changes. Greenhouse gases are released when forests are destroyed or degraded by activities such as illegal and unsustainable logging and from land conversion for agricultural use. So once we destroy, we may cut down the forest, but it may not necessarily mean like we are not using it for good things. It may be used for agricultural purpose. But remember, the crops and the food that we're going to be using, growing them for the agricultural purpose, may not serve the purpose of which the forests were providing. For instance, if the forest was providing home for other animals, once we cut down the trees and then turn it into for agricultural use, we cannot allow those animals to come back and live there again, which is a very, very great distraction to those lives that live there. To bring my message to a close, I'll go down to biodiversity loss. That is another effect when we cut down the trees. It says, furthermore, we must control forest fire. We must adopt the latest techniques which will help in firefighting more efficiently. This will prevent further loss of trees and animals. most importantly, afforestation plus reforestation must be practiced. The people and government must plant new trees in places of the ones cut down. Moreover, the most plant the most plant trees in new areas to develop a forest. So we must also do our best as we derive our income from cutting down the big trees. The government must also support or put on initiative to help people to plant trees to replace the old ones. I believe by doing this, you'll be able to save the forest and save the other lives that depends on it. And this brings the end to our presentation on the reason why we should preserve the forest. Thank you, and thank you once again for honoring this invitation. And I'm very, very glad to have you guys. Thank you once again.
Thank you.